Okay, so I decided to start doing movie reviews as well. This channel is a mess, just like my life, just like my brain. And I think the only way to get it up and running again is to be posting here about everything that I'm consuming, I guess. When I'm playing, when I'm watching, when I'm reading, just what I'm doing, because this channel was originally started, like, I know I'm not gonna become like a huge booktube channel. This channel was originally started to like get recommendations from people, and also as a journal of what I've been doing this year, and the year's almost done, and I've kind of failed at that, but I'm still trying. We soldier on. Let's get to it. I'm gonna review 2 movies because I kind of feel the same way about them, even though they're drastically different, and I'll get into that. But the first movie I am going to review is It Follows. It was directed by David Robert Mitchell, I believe. Looked that up. Came prepared. Pretty awesome. I don't know. But it was directed by David Robert Mitchell. It involves a group of teenagers who encounter what you could call a curse, I guess, where you have sex with someone and you pass this curse to that person, and it involves being followed by a random person. Sometimes you recognize a person, sometimes it's just someone who follows you, and if the person catches up to you, it kills you. I would give this film probably an 8 out of 10, which is very, very good for me for a horror movie. I love horror movies. I've been watching a lot of them over the past few years, but I don't think a lot of them stand up to movies of other genres I appreciate. What it does, though, is it relies on pretty cliche horror movie tropes. There's teenage sex, which often, very often, plays into horror movies. Sex and horror completely go together, especially underage or premarital sex. Go together like peanut butter and jelly. There was synth music, which is often used in horror movies. There were the people that followed them were kind of like zombies in a way. There was a lot that paid tribute to the horror tradition. Yet when you left the movie, for me, when I was done with the movie, it felt like a horror movie I had never seen before. It was crazy to me that so much of it was kind of predictable, yet I wished I had seen more horror movies like this. There were also some things that I think heightened the experience for me. One, I'm a big fan of cooler color temperatures for horror films, where the whites almost look blue and everything's either really dark or really bright. I'm such a big fan of that. To me, horror movies, above all other movies, are all about your senses and making you aware of your senses. So this film really ticked all the boxes with that. I also think there was something that threw me off with the technology in the film. It seems like it takes place in like the 90s or something, and they watch a lot of older movies, and they have like, do you call them boob tubes? There were no flat screens in the movies, how I guess you'd say it. But randomly, there's a character, a young girl who's reading Dostoevsky's The Idiot off of what looks like kind of an iPhone in a compact cosmetic case shaped like a shell, and you're just kind of like, oh, I don't really understand. And it would make sense if it was just in context of The Idiot, But it kind of doesn't make sense in relation to, I'm fairly certain earlier in the film there's another screen that pops up, kind of like iPad like screen in a, it seemed like at a church or something. So that kind of threw me off. I probably should have looked up other people's view of that, but that threw me off. Maybe I imagined the other screen and the idiot reading The Idiot and that little compact shell case makes sense. I'm not really sure. But I think where this movie excels more than a lot of other horror movies is the pacing. There's a lot of use of silence, and usually silence in other horror movies kind of warns you that a jump scare is coming. Like if someone's walking down a dark hallway and everything's silent and all you could hear is the footsteps, you think, oh, something's about to pop up and make a sound and I'm gonna shit my pants. There are some jump scares in here, but for the most part, that's not what I don't want to say terror, but that's not where the eerie feeling comes from. I think maybe modern horror movies rely on jump scares a little bit too much, but that's just me. The pacing is almost like movements in a symphony. There's periods where there's a lot of action, and one of the biggest scenes for me is when the teenagers are just sitting on a beach. You hear the typical sounds of a beach, but they're not saying anything. They're just sitting there, just kind of doing whatever. Someone's in the ocean, and you see one of the kind of zombie-like creatures coming in the background towards them, and it's fucking terrifying. And I don't normally get scared at horror movies. It really freaked me out. So I just appreciated that it took a lot of things that we've seen, especially in the 90s. It was like, I don't know, such a 90s thing, but it took a lot of things that horror movie watchers have already seen, and I guess you could say elevated it. That sounds a little pretentious, but it somehow, after viewing all of that as a viewer, you feel like, oh, I just saw something new. This is a new type of horror movie. It relates back to the second movie that I saw and really liked. It was called Dope. A lot of people, especially in the Black community, have heard about this and talked about it. It's a mainly black cast set in a black neighborhood, and it's about nerds, which you don't see many black nerds being portrayed on film, on TV, anywhere, even though there are a lot of them in a lot of black nerd groups, but I don't know, whatever. Dope was another movie, like It Follows, where it relies on a lot of things that we have seen before. It's somewhat of like a comedy of errors in which a group of 3 people of color, so it's not an all-black cast, it's people of color, I guess is what you say now. 3 people of color who are nerds. They're obsessed with 90s rap. They have their own band called Oreo, which most black nerds can sympathize with, because most black nerds have been hit with, you like white people things, like sci-fi, you're an Oreo. A lot of people get hit with that, but they end up in a predicament involving drugs and gangs, and what happens is totally like a comedic, hilarious, heartbreaking comedy of errors that we see over and over and over. We've seen over and over and over again. Most of all, I think what was innovative about Dope was that, gangs and violence and drugs and horrible things exist in the world, but I think a lot of cultures and ethnicities, a lot of crimes associated with different cultures and ethnicities have been given a treatment that I feel like crimes in specifically black communities haven't. A lot of criminals, a lot of seedy underbellies of communities get afforded this complexity on film and in the media that doesn't happen to a lot of other communities, especially communities of color. There's even a emphasis in the film, like a really explicit emphasis on, you know, we're complex. We're not just thugs. See how easy it is to find yourself in the place of the violent criminal, even though you're not a violent criminal. And I think the best part of this movie, and this is a bit of a spoiler, but not really, I'm going to try to be as vague as possible. There's literally probably about 10 seconds of this movie that really cemented its place for me as one of, if not the best movie I've seen this year. And it's a part where the main character who we follow, this is relatively late in the movie, so we've followed him for a good amount of time and got to know him. And he makes a decision where he starts to become a person you don't want him to become, and he doesn't want to become. And there's a moment where he makes a choice and he like pulls something out, and this antagonist looks at him not with hatred, not with, like, even thinking about it kind of like brings tears to my eyes, not with hatred, not with vengeance, but he's sad for him. And that's the complexity I wish I could see, not just in films about people of color, just in most films, but especially films about people of color, because there aren't many films like that. But this whole movie, this person is a very clear antagonist, and you see the dynamic between the two as one that both of them, they're both in positions they don't want to be, and there is still kind of, I don't know about love, but community between them. So to see some of them, to see one another fall out of their place, I guess you could say, or do something that could really ruin their lives, hurts both of them. And I just thought that was, I mean, sounds pretty, I don't know, sounds pretty mushy, but it was kind of beautiful. It was probably one of the most beautiful moments I've seen on film this year, at least this year. So I would highly recommend It Follows and Dope. They are both very different movies. Dope is heavily entrenched in, just in the context of its release, heavily entrenched in issues of race and politics and all of that, but you can of course go see it and miss all of that and totally enjoy the film. They're both very different. I appreciated both of them for how much they made me enjoy cliches that I've seen over and over and over again as someone who has watched too many films in her life.